and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. As always, I'm really excited and grateful that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. And today on the podcast, it's just going to be me behind the mic. I am chatting with you all about self-publishing, the book that I released in the fall of last year called How to Master the Business of Yoga. And this was a huge project for me. There was a ton on my plate while I was doing this, but I wanted to walk you guys through this and what this process is like, and just encourage anyone out there who's maybe got a book idea to just go for it, because there is nothing special about me. And if I can do it, you guys can certainly do it. So I want to kick things off by talking about where the idea for the book came from. And in order to share that, we actually need to back up many, many years. So we'll go back in time to kind of like late 2017, early 2018. I can't remember exactly when it was then, but I know I was living in Mexico City for the first time. And I distinctly remember the apartment I was in and the conversation with my husband and all that type of thing. And he had, I think, recently purchased Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss and was like, this is such a cool concept. You know, he's like taken some of his podcast interviews and he's broken them down into these like tangible bite-sized pieces of information to share with his audience in book form. And he was like, you should do this. And I was like, yeah, that's like a cool idea and stuff, but like, I'm not Tim Ferriss, so that doesn't really seem like something I could do. And in true nature to who my husband is and just his like, you know, encouragement and stuff with everyone really, but certainly with me, he was like, why not? Why could you not do this? And it kind of sparked a little idea in me in terms of like, well, good question. Why couldn't I do this? And so I got on the internet and I did a little bit of research on self-publishing books, and it seemed pretty straightforward. I mean, anyone can self-publish a book. And so I thought, okay, cool. Why don't I try and do this? And so at the time of doing this, or the time of this idea coming to fruition or coming to life, or the seed being planted, let's say, I didn't have that many episodes of the podcast. So my thought was like, okay, I'll create the book with every episode of the podcast that I've done so far. And so what I started doing back in 2017, 2018 is re-listening to my early day podcast episodes that I'd released in 2016. And basically listening through, creating, you know, kind of a summary of it, a little write-up about the guests that I'd had on and the overall business lessons that I've learned from them, and kind of made it into this like bite-sized, tangible takeaway. And so I just started from the beginning and went like that. And as with so many projects, life happened and I got a little bit derailed. So I think I had maybe written like 5-ish of these kind of really early day episodes. And then this project sat on the back burner for 2 full years. So if we go back in time, 4 years from the time of recording, early days of the pandemic, I had recently hired help. I had a wonderful assistant who was working with me, who also happens to be an insanely talented writer. And I reached out to her being like, hey, do you want to help me with this project that's basically been on the back burner for 2 years as I've been traveling and working on taking on new clients and growing my podcast and growing my business and teaching yoga and doing yoga teacher training and all these things that I had been working on through that time that had prevented me from really making progress on the book. And she said, yeah, for sure. Just let me know what you needed. And so I said, what would be so helpful for me is the actual like transcription of the audio. So basically, if you can listen to them and basically take these episodes and turn them into something, then I can do the rest of it. Like, give me something to work with from them. Because that's the thing that's so time consuming, is to actually listen to these episodes. And if you have listened to MBOM, then you know our episodes are generally not short. I try to keep them to about 45 minutes these days, but a lot of them are like an hour or so. And so if you're listening and trying to take notes and write and pull up business lessons, it can be a little bit tedious. It takes a couple hours per episode. And I just was like, I do not have the capacity for this, yet I still think it's a great idea. So one of the other challenges that I had at this point was that we had done 2 years worth of recording basically without stopping. So that was over 100 episodes. And so I knew that that was way too many episodes to go into the book. So what I had to start doing was I had to start actually like going through the episodes and being selective. So it no longer became this thing where I was just going to take, the first 50 episodes that I've done of my podcast and turn them into this resource. I actually wanted to create sections, and I actually wanted to be really strategic with what I wanted to include. So we got to work on that, and we made some, somewhat, I would say, like slow progress on it, but I really didn't have a deadline at this point. And again, I decided to self-publish. I knew I wanted to do that the entire time, which I'll talk about why in just a little bit. But fast forward, obviously, like the pandemic happened, things were really busy. And one of the main challenges that I experienced kind of on the other side of the hump of that was making sure that the episodes I was choosing were still relevant content, because as you guys know, so much changed in the yoga industry through the pandemic. So much stuff went online, and we did so much content about online yoga, which actually there is a whole section in the book on teaching online, which had I actually published this pre-pandemic, like that probably wouldn't have existed, right? Because it just wasn't really something that we were doing at the time. So we continued kind of working on it. And then I got pregnant in the spring of 2021. And my focus went towards, obviously growing a human and getting ready to have a baby and preparing for maternity leave. And so another kind of little pause happened, because let's remember there's only so much that my assistant can do for me, because she's not actually writing the whole book. She's just going through the episodes, and she had been diligently sending me stuff, but then I would get behind on stuff and I wasn't, writing and editing. And so things would just get behind. So beginning of 2022 happens. I have my baby girl, and I'm offline for a couple of months, and I come back to work very slowly. And I think it was probably the fall of 2022 when I sat down with my assistant and said, hey, let's try to get this out in the next year. Like, I actually want to do this. And I think if we sit on it any longer, then it's just really not going to happen. And so that was basically for my own accountability, because she was doing everything that I had asked her to do. I was just the one that was not really doing the work. And so I spent a lot of nap times just actually sitting down and reading through stuff and editing stuff and writing stuff and organizing and choosing episodes and getting permission to use them, et cetera, et cetera. So the writing process for me was, I would say, extremely challenging. And I know so many people talk about writing books and they are able to do it so much faster than what I did, because let's remember, I put this out in September of 2023, and I probably started this after September of 2017, but that's like 6 years. Like, it was almost 6 whole years that I had this project kind of on the back burner. And so many people did not know about it, because I wasn't totally sure that it was ever going to come to life, just because it was taking me so long. So I want to talk about how I actually got this done. And I think I've kind of outlined that a little bit, but I think a couple key things were having somebody to help me actually do some of the work that was the most time consuming. And I think now in 2024, there's so much that like AI could help with this type of thing in terms of like transcribing an episode and giving you the top points and stuff like that. So you could totally use AI with something like that if you were going to do an idea similar to mine. But for me, having help was really key. It was like having an accountability buddy, having somebody else who was working alongside me. And then I think when I finally set that due date, it lit a fire under me a little bit, because I was like, okay, what actually needs to get done? And that's when I actually started scheduling time into my calendar each week to work on things and putting tasks like, hey, I need to go through X episode. Okay, she sent me this. Okay, we need permissions from this person. Like actually starting to work through the to-do list. And I think that this is a really, really key piece. I think we know this. I think we know this as humans. I think we know this as entrepreneurs, but when you don't schedule things, they often don't happen, especially things like a book project, because unless you have, maybe a contract with a publisher or somebody or like an editor who's on top of you, it's just going to be so hard to find the time to do that when you're on the hamster wheel of life, just constantly trying to do your to-dos and constantly trying to just like stay on top of your work. Like life is busy for all of us. We all have a bazillion things going on. And so it can just be so hard to get this done. So I think that having accountability, having a deadline, setting a schedule for yourself is so key when it comes to the writing process. And then just pushing yourself to do it, even if you don't feel like doing it. There were many of my daughter's naps where I felt like doing something else other than working on the book, but I was like, no, I need to make progress on this. I need to do these things. I need to like make this happen. And so I wanted to talk about why I decided to self-publish, because, we did this episode last week where we talked with Brett Larkin, and she talked about not wanting to self-publish and always wanting to go through a publisher and her process with that a little bit. And I think that people often feel strongly either way. And then some people just don't know what they want either way. I think for me, I just really knew from the beginning that if I was going to do this, I was just going to do it on my own terms. And I was very aware that, I'm probably not going to make as many sales because I'm not going to be in like the Barnes and Nobles of the world, at least not at this point. And, it's only going to be sold through Amazon, at least at this point. And there's people who don't want to purchase off Amazon, and there's people who can't get Amazon books, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these things around that. But I felt like if I spent time on the book and then I pitched it to publishers and that wasn't working, that wasn't going to be very motivating for me. And I really wanted to be motivated to do this and to do it on my own terms. And I wanted it to be my book. I wanted it to be good quality and obviously have a second set of eyes on it and have somebody edit it and all that type of stuff. But I really wanted to do it, my way. And I felt like the best way to do that was to self-publish it. And I had a really incredible experience with that, which I'll actually walk you guys through a little later what that looked like. But I want to dive a little bit more into what happened after the actual writing process. But before we get into that, I want to just take a quick moment to talk a little bit about our sponsor for today's episode, which is Offering Tree. And I think you guys have heard me talk about Offering Tree quite a bit over the last couple of years as I've worked with them, but I want to just share a little bit about what is Offering Tree and why I love them so much. So they are an all-in-one software for your business, one website, one place for everything, a place where you can host your membership, your on-demand library, your class schedule, your emails, your blog posts, take easy payments all in one spot. They're also a public benefit company, so they're all about helping you first, and they've tried their best to keep their costs as low as possible, and I think they've done a really great job, especially compared to a lot of the other companies that are on the market these days. And so they've bundled a ton of value into their essentials plan with no hidden costs or fees. There's no like, hey, you've got to upgrade now to use this, which I've seen with so many platforms. And they really have a step-by-step process for setting up your site, which makes it easy to design something unique in like 30 minutes. They have an unlimited page builder, which gives you endless possibilities for business growth. You can update your site, which is super simple. And you can also create engaging digital content, video libraries, courses, challenges, coaching programs that meet your clients and students anywhere at any time. So you can really do everything with Offering Tree. When I teach the business of yoga to new yoga teachers and I'm talking about softwares, I don't even like sharing other softwares anymore because it's like, oh, this one software that costs $40 a month does this one thing. And this other one that costs another $40 a month does this other thing. When Offering Tree literally does everything for you in this one-stop shop way. So if you were looking to simplify your business and to support a great company, then you can head on over to offeringtree.com/MBOM. You get a little discount through that off of the annual plans or the first 3 months of the monthly plans. So once again, that's offeringtree.com/MBOM. All right, let's get back into the episode and pick up where we left off. And so I want to talk a little bit about what the editing process looked like. And so in the early spring of 2023, the book was finally ready. And so the first thing that I did was I asked my assistant, who, like I said before, is an incredible writer, I asked her to go through and read through the book for kind of like just a read through and some basic edits and that type of thing. So she did that, and then she made a bunch of changes and whatnot, and then sent it over to me. And I did the same thing. So I did this when I was in Japan, which was April through till May of 2023. So this is one of my big kind of side projects that I worked on during nap times and breaks and downtime and travels and all that type of thing, was just reading through the book. And one thing that is so interesting and so surreal about this process is when you've had your hands in it for so long, it's like parts of it you forget, but then parts of it are so familiar to you. And so we had kind of 2 read-throughs before I sent it off to an editor. And I felt really, really fortunate to have a good friend in my network here in Mexico who actually is a book editor. And so before I had gone to Japan, I had actually sat down with her and just said, like, hey, do you think this is up your alley? Is it something you could do? Could you do like the copy editing on it? Blah, 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 all that type of stuff. She said yes after she looked at the manuscript and that type of thing. And so when I got back from Japan and I'd finished reading it through, she took a look at it. And so she sent it back to me. I think it was finished sometime in June or maybe July, I think, at that point. And so then I headed to Canada. It's so funny because I have these memories wrapped around places that I was when I was actually working on the book. And so when I headed to Canada, I had received the edited version of the book. And so the edited version had a lot of, things that I had to go through and accept and change and make changes with and that type of thing. So that probably took me another maybe like 6 weeks to do, of actually like going through the edits that the editor had given me. And after that process, I think it was like end of August that we returned from Canada. And I think that by the beginning of September, which was actually my goal for releasing the book, I'd said beginning of September. But at that point, I was just like, anytime in September is fine. So by beginning of September, the book is edited. It's ready to go. But what we don't have is we don't have formatting or a title page. So we used people on Fiverr. And I know this was something in the episode with Claudia Azula that she talked about, where she didn't have a very good experience with working with people like on the internet and hiring them from these sites. She found them expensive and had to rehire. And fortunately, that wasn't my experience. I had a really good experience both with the person I hired to do the title page for the design of the book, as well as the formatting. So I think a couple of things that I learned from this experience that I would like to share is that I think it's really important to spend a lot of time doing research before you choose a person. And I think it's really important to make sure that you go through the person's work and make sure that it's aligned with what you're looking for. And then to also look at their pricing packages and make sure that you understand completely what you are purchasing with the pricing package. And I think that with some of the websites like Fiverr, like the one that I used, is that they often will upcharge for additional edits or additional changes that you want. So I think just making sure that you really understand what you are going to be getting. And then I think just having a conversation with that person that you might hire before you hire them. So for both the people that I did hire, I reached out before. I told them about the project. I told them about my vision. I told them about my ideas, what I wanted, especially the person who did the book formatting. He was incredible. He asked me a lot of questions in return in terms of what I was looking for, just to make sure that we were on the same page before a single cent was exchanged. And I think that this was so helpful to make sure that we were both very clear about what I wanted, what he could provide, what was included in his packages, et cetera, et cetera. And because of that, it came back with, I received a product that I was very happy with. And it was the same thing with the title page. I had provided some ideas about what I was looking for, some ideas around coloring and my branding and all that type of thing. And honestly, there was very little edits that needed to be made with either. I was really, really pleased with both the people I hired, and both of them were quite affordable. I think it cost me about 300 Canadian dollars per person. So maybe that doesn't sound affordable for Fiverr, but I do feel like my experience with Fiverr has been that you need to pay people what they're worth. And if you're not going to pay people what they're worth and you're going to spend $5 on something like book formatting, you're probably going to not get a very good job done. And so I felt like this was quite reasonable for what they were doing. And so all of this came back pretty quickly. Part of the thing with Fiverr is that you can actually outline timelines, and they have to meet those timelines, and then you have to meet timelines for edits, et cetera, which is something I really like about that platform. But I felt really good with getting all that stuff back. I got it back, probably around mid-September. And then the person who did my book formatting, part of what he actually did is that he helps with the setup. So the way that it works to self-publish a book through Amazon is that you do it through Kindle Direct Publishing. And so you can create an account through there. I actually already had one. You go into it, and then basically you upload the digital format of your book. You upload your title page. It actually does like a little bit of a scan through your book to make sure there's no spelling errors or anything like that, which is really great when you're taking something from like a Google document or a Word document into formatting, because it comes into a different format just to make sure everything, went over correctly. And then you get a chance to look at it. And from there, you get to enter the details. So you get to choose what it's called, what the description is. You get to write your author bio. You get to choose the pricing on it, and it'll tell you the breakdown of like how much you make off of, the books that are purchased in person, the books that are purchased via Kindle, because the way that it actually works with the self-publishing through Amazon is that they print the books on demand. So this is one of the things that I really love about this, especially because I live in Mexico and it's far away and it's hard to mail things and that's expensive, et cetera, is that when somebody goes and purchases it, the book gets printed and then sent to them. So there's no warehouse anywhere in the world that's like housing a bunch of my books right now. It's when you go to the site and you actually purchase the book, then the book gets like printed and sent to you. And so I was able to see the breakdown of like what those costs are and how much I would revenue from each book. And once all of that's done, then you can go ahead and like hit publish on it. And so I have this funny memory of being on this call with this individual who helped me with the book formatting. And I was like, oh, I feel like I'm not quite ready to hit publish. Like I didn't know we were doing this kind of right on this call, right in this second. And he's like, oh, well, each store takes like a couple of days to actually approve it. So I would just go ahead and hit publish right now. And I just feel like I just wasn't ready for the moment. And I was like, oh, okay, sounds good. Let's do it. So we went ahead and hit publish. And then I was like, oh, whoa, we're like actually doing this. Like it's actually out in the world. And, sure enough, it takes a couple of days and then it's up in the Amazon site. And then, obviously people can find it through searching, but as you guys probably know, Amazon is a very, very deep well of goods and products, and there's many, 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 many books on there. And so part of the process with self-publishing, and especially through Amazon, that's really important, is that you do actually need to do some marketing with it. And this was a really interesting process for me because I teach marketing and I work with clients on marketing. But one thing I found in my business is that it's so much easier to look at somebody else's business and give them advice and give them tips and help them create a plan and walk them through strategy than it is for yourself. And so obviously I had done a little bit of work kind of on the back end before I hit publish on the book. But one of the things that was important for me was to actually see a copy of it before I started marketing it. So I had hit publish on it, but one of the things I'd also requested was to see a author's copy. And so it comes in the mail. It says this is not for resale. It's basically just a copy of it because I wanted to actually hold it. I wanted to feel what the pages felt like and see what the ink looked like and just make sure I was happy with everything. So it was this awkward kind of few days of my book has been hit publish. It's on some of the stores. It's getting approved for others. I'm waiting for this copy to get to Mexico before I tell anyone about it. But I'm also excited to get started and start sharing, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk through a few of the things that I did. So I shared it on my social media, of course. I actually shared it both on my business social media and on my personal. And I was hesitant to share it on my personal, but I actually it was received very, very well. I had a lot of family and friends who were very excited to support me, which was just very heartwarming and very beautiful to experience. It's a reminder that people in your community will really show up for you when you do something as big as, write and publish a book. And then I shared it on our email newsletter. And of course, I shared it on the podcast. And we did a couple of giveaways, both via the email and also via the podcast. And those were great. And then I ordered a bunch of copies to be sent out to a number of the people who were in the book. And so this was really, really fun because people were able to share with their audiences and their social media. And it was really amazing to see how excited people were to see their interviews featured. And this was truly not just me who did this. I could not have created this book without so many people's help, which I've mentioned. Obviously my husband gave me the idea and my assistant helped me, and I had my editor and the formatter and the designer, but also the guests on the podcast whose interviews were included. I mean, we would not have this amazing resource with a wealth of knowledge if it wasn't for people being able or being willing to come on the podcast and share their information with us, and then being willing for me to turn this into a readable resource for people. And so yeah, we shipped a lot of books out to people, and then people were sharing on their stories, et cetera, et cetera. And that's basically what we've done so far. So sharing with my network on all the platforms and sending emails, talking about it on the podcast, and then sharing it with people who are featured in the book. And then I've had, a number of people who were featured in the book wanted to do interviews with me or do giveaways. And I've been on a couple of podcasts talking about the process of the book. And so those invitations have been very gladly received by myself. And I've been really pleased with, the sales so far and the people who have reached out and given me feedback and said that they bought the book and they love it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been a really, really beautiful process. And I'm not going to lie, it was pretty scary to actually put it out there and share with people that I did this thing and to make my work so vulnerable. But I feel like the support that I've received has just been absolutely overwhelmingly positive. And I've been so grateful to have this experience. So Overall, I feel like for me, self-publishing a book was a long journey and a hard journey. But once I actually kind of put my mind to it and dedicated my time and energy to it, I feel like the process was just really wonderful. It was a great learning experience. And it's been a really, really cool experience since I actually launched it. And it's been cool to see who's ordered it and who's reading it and who's supporting it and all that type of stuff. So I hope that this is inspiring to anyone who is sitting with a book idea and is just uncertain about what they want to do. I think that if you decide to go through a traditional publisher, that's a beautiful route as well. But I also hope that this, encourages people to maybe just go ahead and write their book and put it out into the world and see what happens, because you just don't know who's going to be excited to read it. And I feel like we all have a beautiful story to share, beautiful information to share. And I feel like we need to get that out into the world. So my experience, like I said, with self-publishing was really, really wonderful. And I've been so grateful for the support. So I hope that that is perhaps your experience as well. If you guys have any questions for me related to this topic, feel free to email me, info@mbomyoga.com. If you would like to check out the book, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com/book, or you can head on over to your local Amazon store and search How to Master the Business of Yoga by Amanda Kingsmith, and you will find it there. If you have anything else that you want to reach out about, feel free to go ahead and do that. I always love to hear from you guys. So we'll leave it here. I hope that this has been both insightful and inspiring for you. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Okay, bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.